I hope reviews of Moon are everything you remember them to be. Let's talk about Moon.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Eye of the Storm podcast. Today, we're doing Have You Seen? And Daniel, do you want to let the people know what that is?
So Have You Seen is our series in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. This week, we're talking about Moon, the 2009 science fiction movie about a helium miner on the dark side of the moon who is the only crew member of a mining station on a 3-year mission, who begins to discover sinister secrets about his employer after he has a mining accident. All right, so Moon is one of those movies that I'm a big fan of, like old school science fiction, like the stuff that actually has something to do with science. Like those are movies that tend to not be done very much anymore, right? Like occasionally something like The Martian comes along, but like science fiction movies that are informed by science and feel like made by somebody who knows a thing or two about science is pretty rare. And Moon is one of those little gems that I'm not entirely sure how well known it is because it made no money at all when it came out. But it's like one of those things that gets frequently recommended, right? So had you heard of Moon before you saw this? And what's your takeaway?
I definitely had not heard about this movie for watching it recently. My take on it, it's a weird one because I feel like I'm missing something. Like my experience of it was fine. It was kind of enjoyable to see how things were kind of unfolding in terms of, him discovering that he had a clone, that he was a clone himself, and after 3 years, something sort of happens to that clone, and then another person sort of replaces them. So it was quite interesting going through that particular journey, but I don't know, I just don't feel like I was completely gripped by it, or even like as strongly emotionally invested as I could have been in this. Things like The Martian. I do normally quite enjoy these type of movies where you've got this sort of solo person stuck out somewhere in the middle of nowhere and they're trying to get back. This was one of them, and it just didn't connect with me the way that it probably should have, to be honest. So I'm a little bit mixed on it. I'm of the impression, okay, it was cool, it was fine, but I feel like there's like maybe some type of like deeper understanding of meaning to it, which I might be missing.
We can drill into that and see what works about this movie or what didn't work for you. So I think the genius of this movie, as well as its limitations, come out in the rewatch. So if you rewatch this movie, you will pick up a whole bunch of things, especially in the beginning, that are really quite masterful, I think. We can get to that. But also, I think, like, as you rewatch it, I think also the kind of the cracks in the premise start showing a little bit. And I definitely want to get into that. So both what works about this and what doesn't. So what was it specifically, like, were you not able to connect with the character? Did you not find the plot convincing? Was the premise just not interesting? Like, what elicited the meh from you?
So at first I thought it was moving quite slow as we were going through the story. It's a solo person on this ship out on Mars, not Mars, sorry, out on the moon.
So it's a mining colony on the moon, yeah.
It's a minor colony on the moon, and there isn't really much for him to interact with apart from this robot. So just kind of seeing him going about his day to day and just doing what he does, I wasn't gripped by it. What had me and what kept my interest was the whole idea of him being at the end of his time served and getting ready to go home. And as soon as they mentioned that, I said, he's not going home. There's clearly something going on. There's clearly some type of thing that's going to keep him here. And it was just the intrigue as to what that was going to be. But maybe like, I'm trying to remember the start of it as well, because I feel like by the time you get to the middle part and sort of later into the movie, you kind of forget what happened at the start. Like you said, it probably comes out in rewatch as the story unfolds and as you realize that, okay, this person's a clone. This robot knows that this person's a clone as well, that he's been interacting with, that is programmed to look after him and have his best interests at heart. Maybe you start to pick up on things on the rewatch at the start, which, make you appreciate it a little bit more. But I just wasn't gelling with it on first watch anyways. I just wasn't gelling with it. His character was okay. I didn't love him, I didn't hate him. I just thought it was okay. He was maybe not as commanding as Matt Damon was in The Martian. And I feel like Matt Damon benefited from having that communication to Earth and having that race against time of running out of resources. Or I can't remember exactly what the race against time was in that movie, but like I know he was scheduled to go home, but it felt like the stakes wasn't high either in this because you're not racing to something.
There's
If
literally
you
a
kind of get what I'm saying.
clock with the kill squad coming to kill all the clones.
Okay. At one point, yeah. At one point, and that's and again that's later in the movie. I think that's like 2/3 of the way in. But it's just like everything before that, I'm kind of waiting to connect, and I'm kind of waiting for things to get interesting. And of course, it definitely was interesting when you kind of find out that they were clones. But even how that unfolded, I was just a bit. I don't know. I was just like not engaged with it.
Were you not engaged the entire time, or did it take a while for it to get interesting? Because like by the time Sam Rockwell argues with himself and begins to take pity on his older dying self and like all of that, right? Like I don't think you can watch that and say, oh yeah, this is nothing special.
Yeah. So for me, it took a while to build up to actually getting my interest. And my problem is by the time we get to the interesting things, is I'm not completely checked into the movie. I'm not completely in love with the movie and dying to find out what happens next, because halfway through, if I had to turn it off and never turn it back on again, I don't feel like I would have been missing out on not discovering what happened by that point. So I feel like it just maybe took its time to get to that point. But again, like everything between Sam Rockwell and his clone, I mean they were both clones in the end, but everything between them was great. It was sort of, are you the clone, am I the clone, etc. And then it turned out they're both clones, and
then they throw out a third clone to throw under the bus in order to save themselves.
Yeah, I do think that was a bit. I was like at the end, I was like, it's a bit dark. I was like, would you not? Because I think in the end, the one that's dying is the one that ends up in the ship that crashed. Then when the other Sam Rockwell is escaping, I was like, I know he knocks down the antennas. I was like, would you not leave a note or something like that? I don't know. I was like, just leave him a note, give him a hint, because that continues the cycle. I know he has live access to connect with the outside world. But I was just like, oh.
That's to knock out the jammers, right? So that I think it's implied that there are other clones in other mining facilities. And now with the jammers gone, they will see the truth as well. I'm not sure how clear that is, but certainly that's like the last thing. Like he's dying anyway, right? And this is the last thing he can do. And then the other thing is that the healthier clone makes it to Earth and testifies. I think in the voiceover they say that he's testifying to kind of blow the whistle on this company. So I think it does end in a resolution in a sense. Like it's not definitive, but at least like we're seeing that this is over, right? This is not continuing. He didn't just save himself. He's actually drawing attention to this and is actually ending the lie, basically, right? But to get back to like something you said earlier about how it's difficult to get into, I think there's two things that really make this more amazing on rewatch and harder on a first watch. And that is that Sam is supposed to be the everyman, right? He's just some guy. He's a space trucker, essentially. Like he's a construction worker, whatever analogy you want to make. He's not a hero in that sense, right? He's just some guy who took a dirty job and is expecting his payday, and it turns out that he's been lied to, right? That he's disposable, right? And the second thing is that we see first 15, 20 minutes, we see his daily routine, right? Which we have to see to establish a baseline in terms of what his life is supposed to be like and what he thinks. Like we have to see what he thinks his life is like or his world is like before we can show that it's a lie, right? But also if you're rewatching this, it's peppered with foreshadowing. So, for example, this whole thing about the 3-year mission being almost over, right? You mentioned that earlier. That is something where that's a ticking clock in itself, right? That's signifying that something is about to change soon, right? Then he talks about, like, one of the first things he says is that he's got an upset stomach. He just wakes up and he's making breakfast, and Gertie asks him if he wants hot sauce, and he says, no, I've got an upset stomach. And that's the first sign that he's approaching, like he's beginning to break down, right? Because it only keeps getting worse and worse from there. But that's like the first sign that something is up, right? He's also coughing. He gets bruised very easily. And also when he gets messages from his wife, I don't know if you picked up on this, but she never ever says anything personal. It's all platitudes.
I did pick up on that.
Yeah, it's like those messages are interchangeable, right? She does not refer to anything he said in the last message. She doesn't answer any question. She doesn't ask him any questions. I think it's dressed up as just the kind of message, like especially after 3 years. If this was real, they would have been sending messages like this back and forth hundreds of times, and at some point they get stale, right? They become mature. And I think on first watch it can seem like that, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think as well, she mentioned about being at someone else's house or something like that, or like I can't remember what she's mentioned, but it implied that they had some type of issue that needed resolving. I can't remember.
There was something about staying, I think, with her mother or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was just like manufactured drama, right? To make it seem real. Because like the entire thing is an act, right? Like she really is Sam Bell's wife. So like imagine how sick this is, right? Not only is he creating, like, did he donate his DNA to make clones to act as slave labor in perpetuity, but also his wife is pretending, is like they are uploading the fake memories, like their memories into the clones. Like the memories are real probably, but they are like from the real Sam Bell, right? And they upload those into the clones. And then she records dozens, if not hundreds, of fake messages to her husband just to string along these clones and keep up the illusion. Like that is beyond depraved.
Yeah, I actually didn't think of it like that. I didn't think about her part that she played in it.
They could have hired an actor. They didn't. Yeah. They just said, hey, by the way, part of the deal is your wife has to pretend to be married to these clones.
Yeah. And for like a large part of it, while it was clear that they were both clones, I thought that the original had died and the company just needed him so much and like his memory that they needed to clone him. Not until the very end when he does the video recording with the daughter, and then you hear him in the background, and I said, damn, he's really, really sold out.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, it's hard to even, because he's sold out his clones, and it's like, how human are they really, and how real are they really? Yeah. I don't know. It just felt, whatever it is, it felt wrong.
Technically, they're his brothers. Like on a biological level, like a clone is a twin brother, right, or a twin sibling. Yeah. Technically, he has sold an infinite sequence of brothers into slavery, so he can have a nice life. He's not a hero. If he didn't know what was going on, then what did he think he was doing? So he must have known, right?
No, for sure.
This thing gets dark. If you think about it.
It is actually, yeah. It's pretty morbid. Jesus. Damn.
Yeah. And one more thing, and one more foreshadowing is the broken satellite. Right? There are these, even before it gets mentioned in dialogue, there are these background status panels that say that the satellite link is still down. And so it's initially sold as just, the corporate cheapskates are, not maintaining the infrastructure, and so he's cut off from Earth. But no, actually, it's part of the charade. It's part of the lie. So that's just scratching the surface. I just wrote down 5-6 things that are really like the most obvious. And if you watch it a second time, there's a lot going on in those first 20 minutes where you begin to like the foreshadowing happens immediately. And I think it's really tight in terms of how his world is constructed, in terms of how his routine is constructed, what he believes about the mission. All of those things are really engineered to create this illusion just to keep the guy motivated and to keep him doing his job. Right all the way down to here's your rocket ship back to Earth, and really it's a gas chamber.
Yeah.
I mean,
they sell it,
including an offboarding video as he climbs into the chamber.
That when I saw that, I said, this is not necessary. Like, at this point, you've got him where you want him.
Yeah.
Did you really need that last extra bit before killing him? I was like, that was a bit twisted when I saw that message. Yeah. I think this is where the movie deserves its praise, because a lesser movie wouldn't have been as well thought out as about constructing all of those elements, all of those. They really thought about, okay, how do you sell this lie to a clone that's, stuck in space for the rest of their life, or not for the rest of their life, for 3 years, and on this like endless repeat. And every, potential question mark that you could have about, okay, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that, is pretty much answered in this, in terms of, he's cut out from the outside world. He's only connecting with them via videos that aren't live feeds. You've got this like robot there that's as well kind of continuing to sell to him this whatever it is. There's this whole procedure of
Gertie specifically never answers a direct question, right? He's always nice and thoughtful and nurturing, but he will never answer your question. But you will think he did.
Yeah. No, the funniest is when you see the face change, when you can clearly see he's like extremely uncomfortable, or something's troubling him, or he's been asked a difficult question, and just like the face changes, they were pretty funny.
Is it beginning to make a little bit more sense why people like this movie so much?
My question on this was going to be, just because it does a lot of good foreshadowing at the start and it's establishing the status quo or sort of what he believes in, does that excuse the movie for being still a little bit boring or mundane for a first-time viewer, as opposed to someone that's seen it before and has the knowledge of knowing where it leads to?
If you recognize the foreshadowing, it's not boring, right? Because it is, in fact, connecting things to things that will happen later in the movie, right? So there's a lot. I've said this before about horror movies, right? Where horror movies have a tendency to have literally nothing happen in the first half hour. Because we want to introduce the characters, we want to show them in their daily routine, so that when the killing starts, we have some kind of familiarity with them, right? And I don't think this movie does that. It does relevant things from the first minute, and the entire thing is about like to some extent we see his routine, right? We see him do the maintenance and fix some drill that's broken down or whatever it was, right? We see him exercise and recreation and watch TV and stuff like that, right? But we're not getting half an hour of him just doing everyday tasks, because even when he does those, we are getting crucial information about what the situation is, why he's there, what he believes about the mission. His interactions with Gertie constantly reveal relevant information. So if the movie's just too slow paced for somebody, that's one thing. But if you take the script and just mark every time something relevant happens, it's constant and it's from the first minute. So I actually think this is a really tight script where we have to introduce the situation, we have to introduce what Sam believes about his world and what is really the case, and then we have to show his reaction to realizing that it's a lie, and his interaction with himself, who is in a different stage of his life cycle, right? So all of these things are happening more or less simultaneously, or in rapid succession at least. Bad pacing is one of my big things about a movie. If it doesn't flow well, if it drags itself out, literally nothing happens for extended periods of time, I'm very quick to throw a movie under the bus and say, no, this is not a good script. But I think this is one where, if you know what to pay attention to, it is quite tight. There's not much fat here. You can make one or two scenes a little bit shorter or something like that. But just in terms of having scenes where nothing happens, or where nothing relevant happens, or where nothing develops, I don't think there are any. And I think for that reason, I would call the script really good. And that's before we get to the performance of basically the only character. He has to portray his emotional state and the deterioration and kind of this existential crisis, but at the same time, he's also professional and smart and resourceful. All of these things are happening. And the movie, I don't think, is very long. I think it's
hour 40.
Under 100 minutes, which makes it, again, not drag out, right? You could have ballooned this up to 2 hours and just show more of his routine and have more time spent before he gets into his accident and stuff like that, right? Or have spent more time arguing with himself or stuff like that. But they didn't, right? I think this is actually quite tight.
I can agree on that, whilst feeling I wouldn't say under what I just whilst I can agree that the script is tight, but not being fully engaged with how with what the movie was at that particular point is what I'd say on it. Because again, I do agree with you. There wasn't any point where I was like, okay, this is played out, especially between the two Sam Rockwells. I didn't feel like it was played out, and it was progressing quite naturally. The whole dynamic was great between the two of them. Another question I had was, what was the purpose of him seeing things in the ship because there's moments where at a certain point I thought, I'm like, is this going to turn into like a horror movie or something like that? Because I had no clue what it was going into it. So when he started seeing stuff in it, I was be like, oh, what's going on here and what's going on with that? And I'm guessing it's due to him being ill or coming towards the end of his life cycle.
So my interpretation is that those are not random visions, right? Those are from his implanted memories, and that's his brain beginning to unravel. And so his brain is starting to confuse memory and what he sees. And so he sees, I think it's his wife, or I think it's his wife, right? Just sitting there.
I thought, did he see a black-haired lady? Because I know his wife was blonde. I can't remember if he saw a black-haired lady as well.
Yeah, now that you mention it, maybe. I don't remember who he exactly sees, but I took it as his implanted memories are beginning, like his brain is beginning to malfunction. I don't think it serves any other purpose than that.
Yeah, and again, like by the time you get to the end of the movie, you can kind of deduce it from as that. But it was just like another point where it was early on in the movie, and it added a little bit of confusion as to what was actually going on in this movie. But I did want to get into some of the themes and some of the deeper meanings, because I felt like I was missing a lot in here, and I was like looking forward to this conversation to be like, okay, what did I not pick up? Because what I was trying to grasp from it was the whole taking back control of your life aspect of it, because it seemed like what he was going through was pretty programmed, and again, quite mundane. You sort of fall into this particular sort of routine, this particular setup that this company had for you, and eventually it was a case of taking back control on that aspect. But
before we really get into that, there's one more thing I want to mention, which is part of the whole of the big lie, right? Mm-hmm. And that is that especially in the beginning, his entire reality is seeded with the idea of purpose, right? Mm-hmm. That he's working towards something and his life has meaning. So he's got a child, right? So he's got that to look forward to, and every sacrifice he makes for his wife and his child, mm-hmm. right? So having a small child is kind of like the ultimate investment into the future, right? Yeah. They didn't have to do this, right? Like they could have just said, hey, your wife's waiting for you on the other end. But no, he's got a child he's never met because she was pregnant when he left. And then he's got the plants. Like one of his jobs is maintaining the plants. That has got to do with nurturing something and building something and caring for something. So that's purpose. And then there's the model. At some point, a clone seems to have started this. But like there's this model of like I'm not sure exactly where the material comes from, but he's kind of carving these model houses, right? And it's turning and like every clone contributes a building or something like that, right? That doesn't seem to be designed, but they're also not stopping it, right? And he basically just thinks it was started by the last person who had this job, but it was actually the previous clone, right? That again has to do with building something. That has got to do with you're contributing a small piece to something bigger that has meaning. And so after you are gone, something will remain, right? It's not when you're not simply cranking a handle for 3 years and then you go, which is kind of the reality of a lot of jobs, right? His environment constantly reinforces this idea that he's building the future. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that is deliberate, right? Like some psychologists, corporate psychologists sat down and said, okay, how can we make this guy motivated for 3 years without ever interacting with anybody? And they came up with like a list of a couple of different things. And even like the scripts of his interactions with his wife are designed to be forward looking. And that I think that does tie into the theme that we're about to get into, right? But I think that is something that's really deliberate about all of this. This is not simply a paycheck. I mean, it is like he believes he took this job for a big paycheck and then he's probably set for life afterwards, right? That's what he believes. But also this idea that there's meaning in his work and that he is building a better future is constantly reinforced by his environment.
And it helps to make sense as to why he would be the only person on the ship, because like that's what I was like racking my brain with at the start, was like, why would anyone take up the role of being a sole person on this mining colony on Mars and not have any human interaction? Because I was like, surely that would turn you insane, that would turn you crazy. But I think, like you mentioned, there was just like enough there where he's working on stuff, he's like building. It's not just kind of riding the whatever vehicle it was to mine whatever he was mining, but there was also that element of building. Yeah, so okay, that makes sense. That makes it a little bit more understandable as to why you would be the only person on here.
I mean, the premise makes zero sense, right? Like, just from a realistic standpoint, this just simply makes no sense. It is said that 70% of the world's energy comes from the helium-3 mining. And you're telling me that you can't simply pay a bunch of guys a big paycheck to run this mining station and it's worth it? The analogy would be something like an oil rig, where people earn absurd amounts of money in order to do a tough job for like 8 months out of the year or something like that. And they cannot go home during those 8 months, right? They live in this remote place in a small group and it's hard work and so on. But they do it because it's a really good paycheck. This is kind of the same, right? Like, it's seemingly just a 3-day trip to Earth. It's not clear why they can't just send like 20 people. They are basically entrusting the energy security of billions of people to one guy, right? That's kind of the story.
Yeah.
And as much as I like science fiction writers have a really hard time coming up with premises that actually make sense, especially when it's like dystopian stuff. Half the time, the big lie is actually kind of unnecessary. Even if you have to pay this guy like $1 million a year, like that's more than several highly qualified surgeons would earn, right? Still worth it, because that helium-3 is worth that much. And you can maintain a colony of 5 to 10 people, and they're there for a year or for a couple of years, and they rotate out, once a year or whatever. Like, there's no practical reason for why they have to lie like this. And I don't really believe that a cloning program is that much cheaper. Like, are you telling me on an entire planet you cannot find 10 guys to work for $1 million a year to live on the moon for a year to do mining work? They don't even do hard labor. It's just maintenance.
Yeah.
So the entire premise is nonsense, but it's in service of this character moment, right? Of you are this disposable cog in the machine. And I wish they had come up with a premise that actually made sense, because then it would be even better. But given that, like, I think the impact of the movie comes from Sam's realization of what he actually is, and how to deal with that, right? And the hopelessness and the bleakness of that. That is what's compelling about this movie, I think. Like, the premise is whatever. Don't think about it too hard, which is a shame. I don't think it's impossible to come up with something that would tick that box too. That's just something you have to ignore. So we were talking about themes in this, right? And what the story is actually about, right? I think you were beginning to talk about that.
Yeah, so I was saying about how I was trying to grasp and pull, the themes and what it was about. And one that I had was the whole taking back control of your life, because Sam Rockwell's character was stuck in this routine that was tailor-made for him by this company. Everything was laid out for him, kind of foreshadowed from the moment he woke up to the minute he dies. This is the path that you're pretty much on, and this is, the life you're going to live. And then it gets to a point where obviously the two clones are awake at the same time, and they figure out what's going on, and then they reclaim or try to reclaim their lives in this. So that was like one thing that was like, okay, cool. That's what I was able to sort of pick out from that. But it just felt like I was essentially I wasn't grasping some of the other themes that was in this movie.
So one thing I picked up on was he's essentially a disposable cog in a machine, and he works himself to death in order to provide a better future for people who barely know he exists and barely acknowledge him as a person, right? And that's like the experience of millions and millions of people, right? People who just spend their entire lives working just to provide for their families or the people they care about, or even their society or whatever, right? And they work themselves quite literally to death just so somebody else can have a better life. And I think that's kind of that idea made absolutely literal, right? Because he is in fact working himself to death, right? He's not like working in a mine shaft or something like that, but his entire existence is working so that somebody else can have a better life. It's both in on a couple different levels. On the one hand, so that Earth has energy, right? So that billions of people can live, right? Like society can function. But also he thinks he's doing this for his wife and his child, right? He thinks he's providing a better life for them, and that if he just sticks this out for 3 years, they will have a better life together. That's what he believes. And then it stings even more that actually his wife, both his original self and his wife are both just exploiting him. Like they have no intention of ever having a future with him, or even him having a future in the first place. So I think that is really in there, because that is something that has been kind of the norm for most people, throughout most of human history, right? That, you just, you work for 40, 50 years and then you're dead.
I was going to say that as well, because they always say, oh, just work hard now, and then, in the future you'll be able to like reap the rewards of it or the benefits of it. And again, that's what his experience was. It was like at least 3 years, and then he'll be able to have the benefit of going back to his family and going back to his wife and kids. But literally, by the point that it was ready for him, it was time for him to go home, he literally died. There isn't like a scientific fact or like whatever, hard study on this, but I know people will have like many examples of people that like work themselves really hard for their entire life. It's like literally the moment that they stopped kind of doing what they were doing, it's just like, yeah,
work has defined them their entire life, and when that's gone, they're not really retiring to anything, right? Because pretty much. That's all they've ever known.
Yeah, pretty much.
The difference here is, and I think that is where kind of the analogy I think kind of breaks down, is that he's not in fact working for something better, right? He's purely working for other people's enrichment who don't even recognize him as a person. Whereas the people who do this in real life, they are in fact buying their family a better life, right? Mm-hmm. Like if somebody works like, I don't know, a 60, 70, 80-hour week, and just so his family can live in it, or their family can live in a nice house, or their children can go to a good school, or whatever it might be, that is in fact something real, right? Like there's not necessarily a lie attached to that. And so that is where kind of the analogy is a little bit strained, maybe.
But you can say you can say that his hard work, again, is benefiting in his mind, real family, because they are benefiting from his hard work, or from him initially being cloned. So whatever he did initially is benefiting his family, even though they understand that it's not him directly, but in his mind, that's what he's kind of doing for, and they're actually reaping the rewards from that.
They're lying to him about what will happen, right? He believes he will join them in the future, and there is now no scenario. It's not even physically possible, because as a clone, he has this short lifespan. So there was never a possibility at which he could in fact have this life that he thinks he's working towards, right? So I think that is where that analogy breaks down a little bit. Unless the movie is saying that people making that kind of sacrifice in life has always been a lie, and I don't agree with that. I think it's a luxury to not have to do this, and it's one that most people throughout history haven't had. So, but that's what I got out of it, right? Like this whole thing, it's like this expression of working yourself to death for somebody else. That's literally what's happening to Sam.
And it's almost like with having the clone, one being at the start of the life cycle and the other being at the end of it, you almost have that whole, not foreshadowing, but the foresight to see this is the path that's out for you, and this is where it's going to like end up for you, and you're able to see it. And again, he was able to escape it before that became his life, essentially. So it was actually quite interesting on that level.
Yeah, that's maybe analogous to somebody who thinks they will get the big promotion or will get the big payday, and then they find out that was never going to happen. Like whoever was making that promise was never going to deliver on that. And maybe somebody who is just getting started in life might buy into that kind of story more easily than somebody who's been at this for a while.
Yeah. But then it'd be like if they saw someone who they deemed was like hard worker or whatever, that was maybe expected for the promotion, and they didn't get it for whatever reason, and it's like, okay, this is, I could follow the same path and end up in the same place, work hard in this particular role in the hope of promotion or in the hope of moving on up, but really and truthfully, by the time I get to that point, it isn't really there for me. So maybe I take a different path, and maybe I kind of like divert and do something different, switch company or whatever.
So I think that stuff is definitely in there. Maybe the filmmakers didn't intend the exact angle that I described, but I do think this whole thing of working towards something and being promised things that will never come and stuff like that, that's very clearly in here. Any other takeaways from Moon? Is it beginning to make a little bit more sense in terms of why this movie is so beloved? There's some things that are, I think, quite obvious, right? Like there's two great actors in this who are basically the entire cast. And I think they sell like that situation really well. And it's basically like a one-room story, right? Where there's basically two characters. They have to sell it, right? And if they don't, then the entire thing falls apart. And I think that really holds this thing together. But beyond that, is it beginning to kind of come together in terms of what the appeal of this is?
I can definitely see the appeal, especially when you're looking at the intricacies of the story itself. And again, it's a very small world that we're in. We're just on this moon, on this mining colony, but everything that they built within that makes a lot of sense and is sort of well crafted to support and aid the story that's unfolding. Because I can see why people would love it. I think for me, it's still probably not my favorite version of this type of movie. Again, if I'm comparing it to others that I had seen, I don't feel like I get the same joy or the same enjoyment out of watching it that I did, something like The Martian. It's definitely like a movie like, okay, I'm not mad that I watched it, but I probably wouldn't watch it again. I still kind of understand why, especially like someone that wanted to understand how to do filmmaking, how to do foreshadowing, and how to, lay things out, and how to even tell like a concise story. Because again, this is only an hour and 38 minutes, I think it is, or even maybe even less than that. So even how to tell, a good story and have some like there were good character moments in this as well. I know I said I didn't, completely fall in love with the characters, but I mean, like a funny moment was when they're playing table tennis, and clearly the new clone hasn't quite grasped how to play table tennis yet, or hasn't had the practice for it, and the other one is just completely dominating them. I think they mentioned the score is like 19-2 or something like that. It's like moments like that. I think especially when they're slowly starting to come together and slowly starting to accept each other for what they are, and even the moment when the dying Sam Rockwell speaks to his daughter on the thing, and then he realizes that, like, before he knows it's his daughter, he's like asking questions, whatever, and he realizes, okay, no, this daughter that I thought I was going back to that was a baby is essentially this grown woman, and that gives even more context as to how long this has been going on for, and like how much time has
15
actually
years,
passed. Yeah. So in those moments, I really did enjoy.
That might probably be my favorite scene in the entire thing, because so much is said between the lines, right? Like that she's 15, that the wife has died. Like this is gradual pulling back of the curtain, right? That the wife died years ago, and that could mean a lot of things, right? And then slowly it starts piecing together, and then we see somebody in the background, and then like a shadow in the background or something like that, and then it turns out that it's him, 15 years older.
Yeah.
And having very clearly forgotten about the clones, because it doesn't even occur to the original Sam that this might be the clone, right? Like it's just some random person calling, and it doesn't even, like, he doesn't panic, he doesn't freak out, anything. Those guys are completely invisible to him, right? And he also believes that there's no way they could contact him, but there's not even like a fear or anything like that, right? It's just purely it's completely off the table that he would ever come into contact with his clone and kind of face that kind of accountability, right? There's so much happening between the lines. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I was gonna say, without explicitly having to tell the audience kind of what's going on, it's just, it's the show don't tell. It's like you're again, like you said, unraveling like so many layers of the mystery in that one particular moment. But each of them like hits hard. Like the moment you realize that the wife's died, and you're like, oh, like damn. And then you realize that it's his daughter, and it's like, and then it's just like, again, like you said, that final one of like realizing that the original one is actually down on Earth. So yeah, I feel like it, that particular scene just like hits on every level, and then you really feel like the emotion of someone that knows they're a clone, understands that they're a clone, but it's that extra layer of betrayal, because the first thing that he does is still try to contact this family that he thinks is real, and that's almost like the last lie, where he then probably accepts that, okay, there's really nothing to go back to, and there's no point, and he might as well just accept his fate.
If there's one flaw in this entire thing, when he comes into contact with his clone for the first time, there's not as much of a scene as you might think there would be, right? They kind of roll with it kind of quickly, but I think that's made up for by like this gradual process of them kind of getting to know each other and realizing they have more in common than they don't, but also then finally this existential resignation and closure that old Sam has after he talked to his daughter and he realized there really is nothing else. There really is only this base. And that not only is his body falling apart, but there wasn't even a chance at anything else ever happening. Like his fate was sealed from day one. Like that realization happens mostly non-verbally, right? And like the actor has to sell it just purely through his demeanor, right? And his mannerisms.
Yeah.
Like there isn't anybody to exposit to, really, right? Like a little bit. Like he does have conversations with his clone, but it's very limited, right? And I think that is the other thing that really kind of makes this really work, is that all of this stuff has to be communicated in a very limited way, right? With very limited characters and very limited opportunities. On that part alone, I think it's excellent.
No, agreed. So I guess last thoughts on it. Again, I will agree. It's a well-crafted story, well-paced, well thought out. Maybe not 100% engaging for me. Anyways, it didn't completely grasp me as I'd probably wanted it to, but it did definitely have, in its high moments, it was definitely high, but just unfortunately throughout most of the movie, it was not high enough to make me want to kind of revisit it or maybe have the experience that I probably wanted to have with this movie. So I guess with that, because I don't want to give it like a middling score, because I don't think it's a bad movie. Like even though I wasn't thoroughly into it, I don't think it's a bad movie.
I think this has a whole bunch of different flaws, right? Like specifically the scenario, like if it does not hold up to any kind of scrutiny, but it's really like the performance, and it's the, like I've said before, get me on board with a character and their journey and I'll go anywhere with them. And Sam Bell is that character, right? He sells the situation that this character is in so well that like the scenario not making any sense does not matter anymore. Right? Like we are purely here for somebody who realizes they are a disposable cog in a machine and nobody has ever cared about them, and his entire existence is just a farce. But it's not even really a farce, right? But it has been to somebody else's benefit. And everything he's ever been told, and everything he's ever hoped for, and everything he's ever going to work towards was all a lie. Like that place as a character works like nothing else. And any other issues you might have with like the premise and the logistics and this, whatever else of it, I think falls by the wayside because that part is so compelling. And on that front, I'd say it's absolutely an excellent movie.
Thank you for rocking with us on this video. Let us know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Have you seen Moon? What did you think about it? Let us know if it's one of your favorite movies. And of course, if you liked what we discussed today, tell a friend. And if you hated everything we discussed today, tell an enemy. We are the Eye with the Sun podcast. Ciao.
Bye-bye.